With a release month already announced for Kaiju number 8, we can look forward to seeing it in April of 2024, which is next year or approximately 6 months from now. There's a lot of hype and excitement around it, and personally, I'm really hyped because Kaiju number 8 has been one of my most enjoyable or maybe favorite action shonen manga that I've been reading right now. This video is going to be mostly around Kaiju number 8 manga, so if you haven't read it, I highly advise you don't watch this video unless you don't mind manga spoilers. However, if you are currently reading Kaiju number 8, I'm here to talk about the great and the not so great about Kaiju number 8. So if you're not reading it on the Manga Plus app or reading the scans, because we all know that's a thing out there in the manga reader universe, come back later, maybe when you hit volume 9 or something, or 10. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Mini Mel and Let's do that again. Okay. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Animel. I am Mel, the host of this channel, and mentioned in the intro, we're talking about Kaiju number 8 manga today. If you haven't read the manga and you're here just to figure out key points about the manga and what makes it really good and not so good, then welcome. And I warned you earlier. Kaiju number 8 is easily one of my favorite manga at this time, or storyline. You know, it's fun. What initially drew me to Kaiju number 8 was the synopsis, and the fact that the character is over the age of 30. How often do you find a shonen character or an action character, more specifically, in any anime or manga that is over the age of 30? Like perhaps you'll see them in a romance, or perhaps you'll see them in a drama, but not in an action anime or manga because, you know, action requires your body to be kind of like able and agile. And as we all know, as you get older, your body becomes less of that. However, Hibino Kafka, our main character at the age of 32, who has yet to accomplish his goal and dream of being part of the Kaiju Defense Force, is finally able to probably actualize his dream because he ends up eating a mini kaiju, which allows him to turn into a humanoid kaiju. And for those of you who don't know what kaiju means, kaiju is like monster in Japanese, but like, let's keep it to kaiju because that's what the manga's name is and that's what the show's name will be. With both his new abilities and his new friend Ichikawa Reno, he gains the courage and the motivation to take the test to be part of the Kaiju Defense Force once again for, I don't know, the umpteenth time. All you need to know is that he's been trying for like over a decade. Now, why I appreciate this so much, the synopsis and the fact that the main character is over 30, is that once you've kind of hit a point in your life, especially once you hit like your late 20s and early 30s, you kind of feel like your life is already over and that anything that you kind of had your eyes set to do in life or had goals set to do and didn't quite accomplish them, you feel like you can't do them anymore. It's kind of a little bit inspiring to see the main character being over 30 and being able to actualize his goal and his dream, and it makes you kind of feel like, you know what? It's never too late. Age is just a number for the most part. And you could kind of keep on trying until you accomplish what you've set out to accomplish in life. Main character aside, another very captivating aspect of Kaiju number 8 is the art style. The art style feels very like edgy and modern. It's got the same edge that the fight scenes have. So the art style plus the fight scenes, it's just a beautiful harmony. The art style, but again, more specifically, the character design art of the character is really cool. They've got this futuristic type of vibe and like with a military aspect when it comes to the defense force, like the attire or the armor, is it armor or attire? What would you even call it? Like the gear that they have to wear as part of the Kaiju Defense Force is very futuristic, but also military looking. And the mangaka goes out of his way to basically make the female characters look super badass. Like, I don't think it's often that you find that the characters look super badass without a little bit of fan service. Like, there's no fan service in this. Widely appreciated. And the women could look badass without having huge boobs or bomb figure, whatever you want to call it. They look great in their attire, they look strong, and they look inspirational. I think that's about the second time that I've said inspirational or something along those lines. I would say that that's definitely like a key theme or a key feeling that you get when reading Kaiju number 8. There's a lot of inspirational stories from the characters in this, which is actually a great segue into character development and character stories. These side stories, or rather the side characters' backstories, are really interesting, and it's not often that you find side characters that are really captivating in a story with the obvious intention that you want to build your main character up the most. The second side character that we were introduced to after Ichikawa Reno is Shinomiya Kikoru. When we get introduced to Shinomiya Kikoru, or Kikoru to keep things short, we learn that she's basically like a prodigy. She's the first of her kind, maybe in forever, to join the task force under the age of 18 at a ripe age of 16. But as we find out, this is kind of stimulated by the fact that the household that she grew up in, her father is basically like the head of not Kaiju number 8, but the Kaiju Defense Task Force. And her mom used to be one of the greatest kaiju-like fighters of all time before her passing. So her mom's dead, always makes great for character backstory, right? And her dad has all this power and influence to the point that when her mom passed away, he was her only guardian, and his way of showing love was not showing love at all. So Kikoru, in an attempt to always attain her father's love with her backstory, is that she's been training constantly to be the best kaiju defense member or kaiju defense fighter of all time, because she thought that was the only way she could essentially attain his love. But before she can even attain his love, he dies. He dies before he can even acknowledge her abilities, her growth, and all that she's been able to accomplish. It's quite sad. Another great character that we're introduced to is Hoshina Soshiro. Hoshina Soshiro is a very unique character in the Kaiju number 8 universe because he is one of the only characters that uses short-range weapons to combat with kaiju. In the universe of Kaiju number 8, it is normally a tactic for you to use guns and big weapons or long-distance devices to combat with kaiju. However, Soshiro opts to use dual swords, short swords. Doesn't make it very conducive for battle. However, he's found a way to make it work. With his internal monologue and his backstory, he always seems to be kind of the underdog, just based on his weapons and the fact that he also has a brother who is also part of the Defense Task Force. While his brother is in a completely separate division, he's always been compared to him. And growing up, the only weapon he was able to really master were the two blades that he uses. Meanwhile, in being compared to his brother was maybe not a prodigy, but somewhat of a prodigy that was able to master any weapon of the sort. So he spent his whole entire existence trying to defeat his brother and be better than his brother. With the dive into Soshiro's character and backstory, within those moments, he gets to actually surpass some of his shortcomings and defeats a numbered kaiju, which tends to resemble a kaiju of real great magnitude and strength within the storyline. But this doesn't come without a lot of struggle and very long fight scenes, which I will say are well orchestrated. The pacing is kind of like a good medium, like a good happy spot for all of the fight scenes. They don't finish in 1 or 2 chapters. They're actually quite lengthy, and I appreciate it a lot. And you could tell that the mangaka puts in a lot of work detail-wise for all of the fight scenes that he not animates, but illustrates. Soshiro is just a really likable character that is able to triumph despite all shortcomings, which makes him another great side character. The last side character that I want to introduce to emphasize how fleshed out the side characters are is Hoshiro Mina. Hoshiro Mina is in her late 20s, I want to say 26 or 27, and she is Kafka's childhood friend. Kafka and Mina both lost their parents to a kaiju attack when they were young. Kafka essentially became sort of like a big brother and best friend for Mina because she had no one else left. As children, they both promise each other that they'll both grow up and join the Kaiju Defense Force as a means of avenging their parents and kind of being part of the force to make sure that no one else loses their parents like they did. However, as you know, Kafka doesn't get to join the task force until 32. Meanwhile, once Mina turns the age of 18, which we are now diving into our backstory at the latest chapters of the manga, she is easily able to attain this goal. Sadly, she has spent most of her time waiting for her best friend, Kafka, to join her in this task force, but she is left alone for close to a decade. Mina is often boasted to be one of the strongest commanders within the Kaiju Defense Task Force. She has an extremely great aptitude for using long-range equipment and was easily able to closely max out her Kaiju defense suit. With that came a lot of expectations of her, kind of like Kikoru. And she was also left alone, kind of like Kikoru, with the exception that she had Kafka. And Kafka was sadly nowhere to be found. Eventually he gave up on taking the test after so many failures, and she was left alone and only climbed higher and higher within the defense task force. By the time she finally shows up, she kind of has some resentment, because even though she had all of these great feats and abilities, and even though she is known to be one of the strongest in the defense force, she was afraid. As a young adult being thrusted into action, and as a young adult who other lives were depending on her, she felt this immense amount of pressure, loneliness, and fear that if she did not succeed in taking down the kaiju with long-range weapons that she basically specializes in using, like, it's gonna be all on her. And she can't live with that guilt. She can't live with that on her conscience. And was always looking to see if she had her friend at her side to support her, because that's how they thought this was gonna go, and it didn't. And even though Kafka was able to finally join the task force or the defense force, he is nowhere near the level of Mina. She's a whole commander, and he's just... Is a peasant the best word for it? Maybe. Basically a peasant in defense force world. So she still feels this aspect of loneliness and tells him, like, bro, it's time for you to really catch up now. Now that you're here, you gotta catch up. So there's this dynamic between Kafka and Mina that's really interesting. You kind of want to see where this goes, if they're able to mend their friendship, and if Kafka is able to actualize on his promise to her, to always be there and protect her and be by her side. Now, as I mentioned, I really love Kaiju number 8. It's great. There's wonderful components like the art style, the character designs, the side characters, and the fight scenes. However, as I mentioned with Mina's backstory, she told Kafka, you gotta catch up. Like, him getting kaiju powers was just a start. And since him getting kaiju powers, I can't say that there's been a lot of development, both ability-wise and as a character. About halfway through the story at this point, we learn that Kafka's abilities are both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. As he continues to use the kaiju power more and more, like basically if he continues to transform into the kaiju and keeps transforming into the kaiju, he becomes more like a kaiju. Like, there's one day that he turns back and one of his fingers stays like in kaiju form. So essentially, like, the more you use it, the more you're going to become one permanently. Like, that blows. And I think it's a good struggle introduction or conflict introduction into the storyline, because Kafka is not getting any development at this point. It's not like he trains to become stronger. It's not like he has become stronger as his human self versus his kaiju self. It's not like his kaiju self necessarily gets much stronger. And it gets to a point that he alone is not enough to defeat some of the other numbered kaiju. Sadly, because of his childhood history and what he has between him and Mina, he kind of has this savior complex. He wants to save everybody, but he needs to first save himself, because you're about to become a permanent kaiju if you keep thinking you can save everybody. And this is something that we see throughout the entire story. Hopefully within this latest arc, which we haven't seen much of Kafka since it started, we'll see some character development growth, because I suspect from the latest chapter, Mina is probably going to be taken or kidnapped by Kaiju number 9. Hopefully, Kafka will get some growth and development, because the savior complex is getting very dry. And the fact that his powers aren't enough to defeat the Kaiju numbers is problematic. Like, you took this 30+ character and just gave him minimal character growth. All the side characters are more interesting than him. The story is not doing it right if your main character is not interesting. Like, if we killed the main character off now, the story would not end, it would definitely continue, and it would still be very interesting. So we've got to work on that. That, I would say, is probably like my biggest gripe about Kaiju number 8. But aside from that, it's a very enjoyable manga. The fight scenes are very well and beautifully illustrated. Like, that alone would captivate readers. And I'm really excited for what the anime is going to do with that. Hopefully, the animation lives up to the expectation. because the art style I feel like is unique-ish. But as manga readers, I think we have a lot of good to look forward to, at least for the first season. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know about the thoughts that I've raised about what makes Kaiju number 8 great and what makes it not so great and not so lovable. Please like, comment, share, subscribe if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more like this. That's going to do it for me today though. Thank you so much for joining as always and for all of your support. I will catch you all next time. Bye.